You know you need a lawyer to be able to navigate your divorce. But what happens if you need to divorce your divorce lawyer? Today's guest is going to help us understand when we need to find a new lawyer and what some of those red flags are that we should be looking for. Let's get started. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and today we have Heather Quick with us. Now, Heather is the founder and CEO at Florida Women's Law Group. So welcome to the show, Heather. I'm excited to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
Right? It's always fun when we get to spend our day chatting with other people and having amazing conversations around the craziness that is the world of divorce. This is a topic. We've occasionally touched on this on the show. I've shared a little bit, like I had to hire a few different attorneys, but that's a big, hard part, right? Like, how do you find the right one and how do you know when you need to move on? And so I wanted us to focus on our time on really helping to empower women to understand, the first question is, how do you find the right attorney for you? So what sort of tips do you have for women out there who are in that searching time period?
So it's a hard one, right? Because you might not be ready to tell anybody. So you might not ask, right? When we ask our best girlfriend about the hairdresser, babysitter, all the things, you might not be ready to have that conversation about an attorney, and that can be challenging. And so then we go to Google, right? Because that is what we do. Or you buy I've never bought this book, but I do know it exists, right? Divorce for Dummies, which, not to insult anyone, but that's the names of the books. And only because this was, so many years ago, a client told me, she was like, I read it and it said I had to interview like 10 attorneys, that's really time consuming and expensive. So, I think that when you're ready, the first thing I think you should do is write down what you want out of an attorney. And you may not know, and that's okay, right? Because maybe your only experience with the legal field is watching Law and Order or, whatever the current TV show is on. That's okay, because you got to start somewhere. Now, I haven't been in all those lawyers and consults, but I know how lawyers, they're not going to ask you. So you need to kind of maybe start there, because that's a good place to start. And if there's no one you can ask, right, which I respect that you just might not be there yet. And kind of like, it's not in your awareness, right? I talk all the time about everything you need to do before you get married, when you're married, like to avoid divorce, all those things. But all the people who need to hear it, they're not listening, because that's not what they're thinking about. Till then it's too late. Oh, I wish I'd known that. Well, you just weren't ready to hear any of that. So that being said, you are going to have to look online and read the reviews, and I'll be fully transparent. I've got people who don't say nice things about us. That's okay. The majority do, but you are a consumer. So think about anything else you would do. You'll at least read the reviews, right? I think we all see a review about, I'm not really comparing us to a hairdresser, but it's a service industry. And I wish we had one in here, right? Who could do my hair before I have to go on screen or something. But we all know when we read one, I think that person might be a little irrational, because then you read others, but at least you get a start. I do that, and I'm sure you do too. And we all have to take them with what they are, but I think it is a good start. And see if what you see on their site or social media just seems like, okay, that sounds okay. That sounds like somebody at least maybe I'd be willing to go talk to, because this is really a huge issue, right? I'm not sure I really want to talk to just anybody. So I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. And that's I started with a Google search. back in the day, right? And then you're trying to click on and read the reviews. And I do think it's important to read the good and the bad reviews because
Yeah,
the bad
totally.
reviews tell you a lot. And 100% love it being related to the salon industry since that's where I spent 19 years. But it is the same, right? There are lots of different hairdressers out there that can all do a really great cut. But there are certain personalities you might like better. Or there's people that specialize in curly hair. So just like in divorce, finding the right lawyer, same thing. I knew that I wanted a more collaborative divorce experience. I knew I did not want to get into a big battle. And so I narrowed it down to collaborative divorce attorneys and started, reading reviews and tried to set up some little phone consults. But I think the biggest frustration for me was, by the time you're ready, you're ready. And
Oh,
then it
yeah.
would be like, great, the next consult is in 30 days. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't have 30 days to wait. So you got to start somewhere and you got to start narrowing it down. And then, you make a decision. And I met with a few, some you knew right away. I remember I walked into one guy's office. It was like old school lawyer, right? Big
Mhm.
table, piles everywhere, big belly, man sitting behind it, like hands resting on his belly, being like, oh, yeah, we can win this, da, 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 right? And I was like, yep, we're good. See you later. Like sometimes, but I also think, a lot of the challenge comes from recently was going back to doing new searches for lawyers for one of my clients. And they all write great articles, right? You can read the blog article, you can read what they specialize in. They're all going to be like, I can do it. I can do it. But it comes down to a personality and like what you need in your situation. And I do think that's where a lot of women too feel like they're going to get into a very big battle over things. And so when you show up ready to fight, then you're going to get another fight on the other side. So what have you seen too in regards to that of trying to move things into more collaboration or mediation versus showing up for a big fight? Do you find they fall
Well,
one side or the other?
I think that, and I've evolved, right? I've gotten wiser as I've aged since from my younger, take them all to court and we're
Yeah.
fighting. I had a lot to prove as a younger female lawyer, but I also really took on my clients' battles. And, I felt like that was important when it was necessary. It still is. Sometimes, hey, that's just what you got to do.
Yeah.
However, as I have become so much wiser, I think that if we have an opportunity to settle this, then we should. And a lot of times it's related to the children. Like, I know this seems like the biggest thing right now, this extra day, but they're 14. Like, these 4 years are going to go so quickly. And that's because in Florida, it's 18, and then the Florida's like, they're adults. So, right, they're going to go live on their own and pay for themselves, which never happens. But so anyway, it's trying to see the big picture, which is so difficult. And which, I think that for your listeners and clients, like, understand, I know it's hard. So, and what I think you should be looking for with a lawyer who does have some empathy, but you also need somebody, not in a mean way, but who's going to say, no, that is a bad idea. That is a bad idea, right? And the reason we know it's a bad idea is because we understand what you want. So they need to ask you. Because I think many clients, just like I said before, they don't know. Most of our clients, they've never been in a lawyer's office before. They don't know what to expect, what things are going to look like. Well, and I don't know, and our attorneys here, we don't know what's going on in your head unless we ask. And so we are going to ask, because now we can say, okay, that is great. And that's like your worst day in court. So let's like try to do better than that. We're not going to negotiate for that. Or what you're telling me is completely unrealistic and not in line with the law. Like, it's just, here are the instances where this could happen. So let's find out or not. And so you need to, I feel like it's so important that your lawyer is telling you the reality of your situation, because that's so important to understand that it's the reality of the facts you've given me, the law in this particular state. This is what we're looking at. And frankly, like, I can tell pretty much anybody who comes into my office, here's your best day, here's your worst day.
Mm.
Now, all only based on the information you've given me, but I can give you a range. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but just to help you understand, if you come in and say, I want sole custody and I don't ever want, his new girlfriend to be around my child at all, I'm going to be like, all right, so how many times has she been in jail and on drugs? And what about him? And I say that because obviously, if those are issues of crime and drugs, substance abuse, okay, there are safety issues, but they're like, oh no, she's his elementary school teacher and he doesn't drink or anything or do any drugs. And I'll be like, that's just not going to happen. We're not going to mislead you on what is possible. And it's hard to know because you've never been, right? You don't know what you don't know, but you all have your instincts in gut check. Yeah. Sounds too good to be true. It probably is. And if it kind of makes you a little queasy and you're like, I don't like hearing this, okay, maybe they're telling you the truth. So it's okay there too. But like, you got to gut check it, which is, how do we do that, right? It's not like I can give everybody a formula for that.
Yeah. And that, because I had never had to work with a lawyer prior to starting to research to hire one to navigate the divorce. And it's also so difficult because the divorce is such an emotional process. And so you start to think that this lawyer, like, oh my God, he said this, and you call them to vent about what he did. And that's also not the right role. So when you are looking, you're trying to find who's that right personality that's going to advocate for you. Do they have the experience you need? Do you like working with them and talking with them? And are they going to call you out when you're asking for things that just can't happen? Because, I mean, could you continue to battle for it? For sure. And waste a ton of money. That's, people fight over toys and trains and TVs and all sorts of weird stuff for far longer than it would cost to just go replace it. But you need somebody who's going to call you out on that. You want somebody who's going to lead you through the process, warmly, lovingly, but also firm, right? It's that grandma talk. I want you to call me out if I'm being a pain in the ass, but I also need to know that you're not judging me and that it's okay for me to show up with all of my mess and all of the stuff that's going on. And you'll find quickly, if you again trust your gut, like Heather was saying, that you're like, oh, something just doesn't feel right or something does.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know that this, since you mentioned grandmothers, my grandmother was like, you don't have to kiss all the frogs to find your prince. If you know, you know. And so I don't think there is a rule one way or another. Mm-mm. And that's why if you start by writing it out for yourself, because if you don't even know, then when you're in that room, you might be like, sometimes I've heard from, folks, they were just so uncomfortable that they're in this process that they're like, I just hired the first one I talked to because I didn't know what I didn't know. And, so I think maybe kind of grounding yourself and and even if it's like somebody who will pick up the phone and talk to me, because, you hear from other people, like their lawyers only email and they don't want to have, a conversation. So that will be important to you. Somebody who is, has a real office. A lot of places now are so virtual. So things like that are that basic, but that's important. Yeah. That's important, I think, to maybe begin to think about.
Yeah, it is important because I hired two different lawyers. The first one helped through collaborative divorce lawyer, right? Like really didn't want to get into any of the drama. So kind of was like, yep, we'll write the things. This is kind of what people put in it or don't put in it, because I did want a clause like, what can I do to protect my son from the other woman? And she's like, well, we can put a clause in there, but I'm going to be honest, it's up to him whether or not he follows it. And if he doesn't follow it, you're really not going to win in court, but you can put it in there, So it was something like no adult sleepovers until you're fully committed, because I just didn't want a revolving door. But again, he walked right through it when he wanted to. And I chose not to go back and fight because, again, she was like, we can try. But, again, there are these pieces. So she would push back. She would help. We really kind of got it all there. And then when we had to go back a second time to get a little bit more fighting, because we had to mediate new agreements with the new fiance, I needed a different lawyer and I needed a different approach because she was far too laid back. And I think that that's one of those big, a flag, whatever color it needs to be. It can be green and they can be great at it. It can be red and they can be not the right fit. But are they the right type of lawyer for the phase of the divorce process you're in? Because we waste so much time and money sticking with somebody who we had before, when maybe now the dynamic of the relationship has changed. And maybe now it is a bit more contested and a bit more toxic, in all honesty. And you need somebody who fights a little bit harder and creates better boundaries. So what advice do you have on that? Picking for the right topic kind of a thing.
What we'll see is cases I think maybe they were afraid or nervous as the attorney to go battle it out in court when sometimes, like I said originally, the issues, that's what they require. I used to think all issues require that because I was a prosecutor. So, I'm just like, let's go plead our case. But sometimes you do, because that's why there is a judge. And often I found early on, the husband would tell the wife, she'd be like, oh, he said this. And so, okay. So they want you to call his attorney. Okay, I'll call the attorney. Okay, you're getting billed, client, for all our listeners, you're getting billed every time we do that. And then he's like, okay, I'll get back to him and I'll talk to him. And then a week goes by and our client's like, what happened? What happened? And I was like, well, I'm not going to call him every day. I'm not going to charge you to do that. Plus, obviously, he's got other cases and they're stringing you along, right? Probably like the marriage. He told you all these things and they're saying that through their lawyers. And I will tell the clients, like, listen, you're going to spend thousands of dollars in 6 months and we're not going to have anything done. And I just think that, which is why you're hiring us for our advice, we should set a hearing and then go, and then we'll have a resolution because our time is so finite and valuable. And I know that just really your basic divorce, it's going to take almost a year, 9 months to a year, probably, which some people are like, what? And it does. So like anything longer than that, I feel for people who are in already that upheaval and so much going on that really you do want to ask your lawyer, even if you think it'll all be agreed upon, because some lawyers are like, listen, as long as it's all agreed, I'm representing you. But if we have to go to trial, I'm out. All right, well, that'll cost more money to have somebody new step in, but good question to ask. And what they're used to doing.
Well, I was going to say on that because I'm curious personally because, you hope, my approach is always, I hope that we get through it with as little conflict as possible, as little disagreement as possible. Yes, there's going to be some, but hopefully we can take a break, step away, come back together. And then if it still can't be done, to move into more of a litigation thing, because I feel like people show up with the wrong mindset, right? With that mindset of, okay, I got to fight right out of the gate. And so I'm curious on that, right? Because I would have never asked about litigation right out of the gate. I wanted to really get through it nicely, collaboratively. Yes. We did have to go back and get some push and shove. And I'm just thinking about some other clients that it's like repeated, right? Repeated, it's always going back. And so there's this time that's wasted in duplicating efforts, but sometimes one step at a time is the right approach.
Yeah. And I think also for the women, you know your husband, your lawyer does it, right? Now we all know, and I mean, obviously my firm is women only and all women attorneys. We know more, men are men and, and it's fine if you have a male attorney, but they have no intuition. They're not like, I don't think this is going to go that way. They just don't, I don't think. So I think there's a lot of different things, but you do know your husband and deep in your heart, he is going to fight you on everything. You know this. They all know this already. No matter what you want. Mm-hmm. There are some husbands, if that's what you want, they're going to make sure that's not what you get. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm saying, trusting yourself. You know who you marry. You know who you're divorcing. I've been doing this so long and my mom had been married several times. You can tell me enough and I can be like, I can tell you exactly how this is going to play out. And this is how they're going to behave. Yeah. And these are the things to look for. We don't have to go gung-ho right now, but don't be blindsided. This is probably the way it's going to be. And you don't want to throw out the first offer because their desire is just to say no to you. So you got to play. It's a strategy. You got to be smart about it.
If you're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted from overthinking, and stuck in uncertainty, this message is for you. You don't have to keep feeling that way. Inside the club, you'll find a safe space to rediscover who you are, clarify what you want, and determine how you want to move forward. Surrounded by women who truly understand and guided by expert support, you are not alone on this journey. Join us at thecrazyexwivesclub.com/the club. It's time to reclaim your life.
So all that to be said, are you maybe hiring the attorney first rather than them? But as soon as they get an attorney or they don't, because I think they're smart enough to do it all by themselves, you need to ask your attorney, what does that mean to you? Your attorney should know who the judges are, what they typically, how do they like we used to have one judge who, I'm telling you, if they went in unrepresented, They're losing everything. That judge had no patience for someone who was not represented, because he's like, you wouldn't go to the hospital and operate on yourself. Like you're here in my world, follow the rules. I also know if they hire certain attorneys, this is how it's going to play out. Yeah. So no matter what he tells you, I'm just telling you how it's going to play out over there. That's valuable knowledge. You want to make sure your firm, your attorneys understand the landscape. Like often some women will come to us since we represent women only. Oh, I can't hire any attorney in, Pasco County because he knows everybody and he's so connected, and I need somebody from the outside. And, back in my younger days, the ego, I'd be like, yeah, we're powering in and we'll do that. But now it's like, it may be true for you, but I don't know if it's as beneficial for you as you think that it would be, because we know the law, all that. Like that part is honestly really easy, but the personality, the stuff and what the court expects the attorneys to do, and you only know that when you're in front of them all the time and the areas. So those are really good questions to ask your attorney, because they'll say, yeah, he hired the attorney and she never calls me back. And she's never going to respond to a letter. Not that we don't still have to do the things we have to do professionally and ethically. But if you think she's coming to the table with a settlement, that's never happening. Yeah. As much as he may want that, it's never happening. Let's just set mediation, because that's how we are going to settle this case. We are not going to settle it by going back and forth. It'll cost you twice as much money than everybody getting together and mediating. So I think those are really good questions for an attorney. And early on, like he's going to get, what's this judge like? What's the other side? What can we expect? And if they're like, oh, I don't know, I just started practicing, maybe that's not the best choice, even though it was a cheap retainer.
Right. Because lawyers are expensive. And I think we see that big bill and we're like, oh my God, I just need to get like the cheapest one possible. Or we get sucked into, there's really like two ways. There's either the retainer, or some people have a flat fee and you go back and forth on which it needs to be. And those are the other areas that we make big mistakes in, that we're trying to figure out how I can do this. And I've watched people waste, it starts out little. If I can just get this one other thing done with this lawyer at this less expensive rate, I'm using the junior attorney at the office to do it, right? But all of a sudden, 6 months later, they've wasted 5 times the amount of money because they didn't just hire for the expertise to get it done right out of the gate. That is also a flag that needs to be looked at. And I'm not saying you have to go pay for top dollar. That's it. There's lots of good things outside of that, but it depends on the complexity of your soon-to-be ex. If they're really going to fight and they're really going to play games, you're just going to want to pay for the top lawyer who understands the games that get played.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that is really important. It's really just understanding how that attorney works. And just like we were talking at the beginning, matching, going with your gut, and for ladies, like they were hiring somebody who is going to do what they told them. So I know oh no, he doesn't want this. He told me. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, why are you divorcing this guy if he sounds so great and he's just telling you all these things? And knowing they find who they want to achieve their goals on the attorney side. And they really do. And it's just kind of understanding that that's just the person he is. So that's who he hired.
Yeah, it is definitely a big lesson in creating really healthy boundaries for yourself, because we all go in thinking the courts are there to protect you and protect the kids, right? And the reality is that it's a little bit broken. And so we can't just rely on the system to be the parent or the guardian of the situation when two adults are acting up. And that's, again, where you want to have the right partner who can guide you in that. Because Googling at 2 a.m. to figure out how a house gets separated or what alimony looks like or this or that, it's so different for every single person. And so you need to be able to go to your lawyer with those types of questions.
And also, it's different in every state because, family law, marital law is very state specific. And so, and I always find it fascinating to talk to lawyers in other states like New York. They're going to maybe appoint attorneys for your children, which takes it to a whole nother realm of expense and involving. So that's why you need the lawyer to explain, hey, what are all these ramifications? If we take this sharp right, all the different roads, you're not going to know everything, but if you can, you should be able to ask your lawyer that. And they should very much caution you on certain behaviors, certain actions. Every lawyer should know, like, don't do that, judge. That is not good. That you are not going to be happy sitting in front of that judge explaining yourself for what you asked me if you should do. And I said, no, it won't go well. And you really need to understand that, because this is your life. These are your children and your money. And frankly, who wants to be reprimanded? We're adults. And you're like, be like, well, that's my kid and I'll do whatever I want. Well, now you're in divorce court. So, you got to bring it down. And hey, many men are like that too, right? Like, I'll go to jail before I pay that check. Okay. Guess what? I got a judge who will put you in jail. So you got to be real careful about understanding you are now have entered this whole new world, and it's not all about what's fair. There is no fair, right? No funnel cake, no, corn dogs here. It's not about fair.
No, it is the deepest business of divorce. So there is like zero tolerance for the emotions. And just because you feel like you deserve it, or it's right, or he did you wrong, that's the hard lesson of the divorce, the lawyer part of divorce, because it is just the business. And there are so many places where you're like, oh, but he did this thing that was so wrong and I deserve to get more out of it. And that's not how it works. And so you want to make sure that you have a lawyer who is protecting you, because the other part of it is the agreements you make are the legal agreements that you make. So you don't want to be agreeing to things that you don't want to enforce and you don't want to move through. And I think that's another area, like, you've got to get real clear on what you are putting in that agreement.
You do. And you really have to be clear and on where do I stand on certain issues. And those are really, and again, your attorney, it is our responsibility to educate you about your situation and the law. But what I recognize is not all attorneys can speak in plain English that's easy to understand. Not all of them have the patience. And also, you can only contain so much information, because, we start talking about, I'm going to explain the parenting plan, right? And it's 20 something pages. And then boom, in your mind, because humans are the way, then you're spiraling and all you're thinking about is, I'm never going to see him at Christmas again. You haven't heard a word I've said. You paid the full hour. You didn't hear a word. You don't understand it all. And I'm not saying that's your fault. I'm just saying you got to recognize that you are going to have to do a lot of work and a lot of extra reading and good questions, but try to retain, because I'll tell you, I'm going to charge you. And so will everybody else. The good lawyers will anyway. I'm going to tell you, if you keep asking me the same question every time, I am going to charge you every time we speak. Even if you ask the same 5 questions every single time, I am, because that is the way we work. So be willing to hear the information and educate yourself, and if you do ask lawyers, well, Google said, I know you don't want Google beside you in the courtroom, but I get it. Like, you're looking for information, and that's fair. As far as a red flag, if your attorney, if you don't feel like they're explaining things to you, that is a red flag. That is our job. Our job is to explain it and confirm. Did you understand that? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Does it make sense? Because that generally is going to take several conversations, and that is fair.
The one that sent me spiraling was, did you also want to process the name change paperwork at the same time? And it had not been brought up anywhere. Now I'm like trying not to tear up. Like, we were in the final phases and it was like, we're going through the paperwork. Okay, we got this, we got this, we got this, we got this. Do you also want to file this? And I was like, I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. So I think that there are some areas, you got to look at the assets. You got to look at the child time. You got to look at the money part. You got to look at the name. You got to look at the house. These are all things that you're going to want to think through prior and have questions to come in and say, okay, lawyer, I think this is what I want. Now advise me, pros and cons. Because at the end of the day, you are the one who makes the decision. Okay, your lawyer advises you. They will file the paperwork, they will do the process for you, but you're the one that has to make the decision. They can't make it for you. And so the more you can work through the emotions prior and then find that right partner, the more successful you're going to be. I think too, the other one, it kind of ties into what we've already been talking about. But if the lawyer's like, oh, well, if we just get them to sign this one, then things will settle down.
Oh my God, don't. Okay. Oh, here's one. Because, we get a lot of people who are switching attorneys or it's over. And it's the worst thing for me to say, for our office to say, I can't help you. You have signed an agreement and that cannot be changed. If they ever say, just sign it, you can always go back to court, run. Like, no, it is just not a blanket true statement. And it is so disingenuous to say that to somebody. You can just go back and spend another $25,000 in a few years. Because one, changing things is way more expensive than the first divorce a lot of times. And it's just, all I can say is it's really difficult. It's not that easy. Whether the lawyer says it just like that, what I recognize is that's what you heard. And we do a lot of like case plans and writing it out because I learned not that long ago here, I think I'm a great communicator. They don't understand a word I've said and they are not listening. And this goes for my employees, for my clients. I'm like, okay, I said this. Is that what you heard? And I'm not being, disrespectful. I just know I talk fast. This is our world, right? And you may hear that name change and you really didn't hear all of the reasons. And so, it's so important that your attorney confirms you really do understand because it is your decision. I can't make that decision for you. We are being paid to advise you. I advise this is a good financial deal. Like this is a thing, or sometimes we have to tell our clients, you better sign a letter that says this is against our advice because this is a horrible, horrible deal. I'm not going to just drop you, but you're going to be really sorry in about 3 years, maybe 18 months. But, and that's the kind of relationship you really do want with the divorce attorney, not somebody who gives you their cell phone and you're talking to them all the time. No, this isn't your friend. This is your paid advisor who gives you hard news, but also has your back and it's got you in the legal arena.
I love that. Yeah. You need a friend. You come to the club. You join a divorce community.
Because that's what you need there. And that's absolutely the correct thing. But like, we are not your friend. You can't afford to have me as a friend.
No. And I think that's hard. Well, that's exactly why I put it together because I just remember that moment when I kept leaning on my lawyer and I liked her so much. And then she just stopped calling back because I wasn't calling about legal things anymore. I was calling about, oh my God, he did this, da, 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 da. I need to know what I can do about this. And I wouldn't hear from her. And then I was getting really frustrated. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. You're dumping stuff on her. That's not her job. She's a wonderful human. And I wanted more. I wanted more to lean on. But I was moving way beyond what the lawyer relationship, processing the paperwork, helping me move through it. And so then you got to put yourself in the right space. You definitely cannot afford to pay your lawyer to be your best friend. I'm going to guarantee you that. So then you come over to the club where you can get that accountability and you go, well, what did you do? And what did you do? Okay, go back and ask your lawyer about this. I love hate when I see them in the Facebook groups being like, what does this look like to get alimony? Or what does it look like on what is the value of the house if he's already moved out? And I was like, why are you coming to a Facebook group? Like, you need to call, this is a lawyer question. This is not a what did you figure out? I don't know. There's these lines, you guys, and your lawyer is your professional advisor. So you should feel comfortable working with them. You should feel like you can bring them your challenges. You should do some pre-work and figure out what you really want and what you still have questions on. And you shouldn't feel afraid to be able to walk away if you believe they are no longer a fit for what you're trying to achieve.
I think, one of the big reasons for that, I think, is because you're having doubts and you're like, I just don't think they've got me. I don't think they're understanding. And then you get this great settlement offer, but you're just so ready. You sign it. And it could be a very good settlement. It could really be great in your interest, but you're not going to believe that because the trust part with your lawyer has been broken. And then that feels awful, right? So it's about the feelings too. I mean, we separate it all, but at the heart of it, this is your life. And if you don't trust the lawyer that you're paying a lot to, then why keep paying? Or if you're paying them and they're advising you and you're not following them, you also need to question that is maybe this isn't the right fit. And maybe you're just like, I just don't like the way you deliver information. Okay, well, talk to your support groups, your other people, but this is your life. This property settlement, this parenting agreement is not easily changed, if at all possible. So as you enter into it, if you don't trust that advice, I just hate to think they're regretting it forever. And it's hard enough without all that, right? There's so much other things that at least you should know, hey, I know that they were with me and they did everything they could to help me achieve my goals. And most of the time, I find that, what men want, what women want, husbands want, they are really different. And that's why I do think you can win, because it's really not about making somebody lose. But what do you want? Right now, maybe we're not going to tell them what you want because they want you to lose, but that's okay. We can outsmart them. Women are smart. Like, we got it. And it really is possible to do that. And it's really unfortunate if you and your lawyer aren't on the same page. And the big thing is they won't call you back. And not like Erica said, then it was too much. I mean, I'm sure she let her know, like, Erica, I'm not going to discuss these things with you. It's not legal anymore. But, that communication, I think that's across the board. That is the biggest thing that clients complain about with lawyers. 100%. Is they don't call them back.
They don't call them back, or they don't email back. I was like, you're too busy. Yeah. You're too busy for me.
So that's why you do want a lawyer also who is not just their only themselves and their cell phone. If they get sick, their kids get sick, like you're out of luck. Like, they're just not around, and you need a little bit of backup, like that assistant, the paralegal, like somebody to kind of help buffer that. But the communication, and that is tough. And I'll tell you, with my attorney, you got to call them back. They deserve to know what's going on. And sometimes I do think that, because I know how slow divorce works, nothing's going on. But our clients, right? You're sitting there at home going, oh my God, it's been 2 weeks. I haven't heard anything. And of course, your husband's in your ear saying all this stuff, whatever. And I will speak for not all lawyers, but hey, I'm not going to call you to just tell you nothing's going on.
Yeah.
And bill you, the whatever.
Right.
But that's the balance, because you've never been in this before. It is your life. You're nervous. Even if we say, listen, they have 30 days to respond to all this, probably not a whole lot is going to happen, except it is happening within you, right? And the emotions and the stress. So it's hard. And I for all you listeners, I feel for you guys. It's tough. It's tough to know is this going right or not. But when you have, Erica's group, I mean, that's a decent sounding board, right? Like, does this sound normal? And somebody will be like, oh yeah, that's normal. They'll be like, oh, no, that's bad,
Right. Yeah. Or it's just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I'm like anxiously awaiting his response and I haven't heard anything. That's the stuff you bring to the sounding board.
Right.
Because we can help regulate that nervous system and get you moving forward, because that is the hardest part, the space in between, the unknown. When you're sitting in the unknown, you've sent a communication or you're waiting for the response from the lawyer, and divorce does take time. So you don't want to rush through it. It is not a thing that you want to get through as quickly as possible. You want to take one deliberate step at a time and make sure you're really lined up to it. Heather, did you have any other tips or red flags people should look out for?
No, I don't. I'm sure I do, but I think we covered a lot. And at the end of the day, I think the theme is really do trust your gut. And if it just doesn't feel right, don't write that check. Just wait. It is okay. You can wait. But you're going to open up all these private things to this person. If you're just, or you do hire them and then you're like, now I don't think this was right. Just trust yourself. Because I think when women are going through a divorce and they've just taken them so long to make this decision, you don't always trust yourself. You're not always trusting of your own decision. So you're going to doubt. There's so much of that. But if you can center yourself and do your tapping, do your journaling, and really start by advocating for yourself with your attorney, it's a good first place, because I know it's difficult. You feel intimidated. They've got a law degree. They know all this stuff, but they're just a human too. And, at the end of the day, you should be able to feel like you can talk to them.
I love that. Thank you for joining today. You guys, all of Heather's information, her contact information is in the show notes. It's also online at thecrazyexwivesclub.com under episodes. This was a super empowering episode for those of you trying to figure out, who do I need to hire? So do your Google search, read your reviews, trust your gut. If you need to switch. It's far more costly to waste time in something that no longer feels like the right fit. And remember, you're not hurting anybody's feelings if you decide that this partnership isn't the right fit. They've got another divorce right around the corner. So until next week, give yourself extra grace, and we'll be back with another great episode. And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.